Catra cares deeply for Adora, but throughout She-Ra, she is reluctant to admit that, even to herself. How long she loved Adora romantically before confessing her feelings toward Adora is not explicitly stated, but it is clear that she has carried within her a form of love for Adora since they were small children. What is clear, even back in their shared childhood together, is Catra's admiration for Adora, her deep affection for Adora, her willingness to sacrifice for Adora's benefit. Corrupting this love to a certain extent, however, is the hyper-competitive environment in which Catra and Adora were raised. Strength, achievement, and power were valorized by that environment. Adora embodied these attributes a little better than did Catra, so the result was that Adora succeeded while Catra languished in comparison. This is not particularly Adora's fault, but it is understandable that Catra harbors some resentment for Adora because of this discrepancy. Now, Catra is bitter toward Shadow Weaver for constructing this oppressive, hyper-competitive environment. She is not completely misdirecting her rage, but it is natural to a certain extent that some of that rage ends up spilling onto Adora, who, after all, is not completely innocent and who does not really understand the depths of Catra's malaise and disdain because of Adora's general obliviousness for most of the show. The decision Adora makes to leave the Horde and join our team of heroes further aggravates Catra's fury. From Adora's perspective, she is choosing truth over deception. She is choosing justice over injustice. She is choosing to fight for a better and more peaceful and more compassionate world instead of simply serving a ruthless, megalomaniacal empire. This is the perspective the show takes as well, but it is smart enough and nuanced enough to understand that this is not how Catra sees Adora's leaving the Horde. Catra takes this as a personal betrayal. To her, it is empty moralism. To her, it is Adora choosing to throw away this status and all this success that she has attained, even though Catra has yearned for those accolades all her life, just to further her own individualistic, egoistic whims. Catra views Adora's choice as caring more about abstract, empty moral principles than about her, the person Adora supposedly cared the most in the world about. Once one understands that this is how Catra perceives the conflict between them, her constant refusal to join Adora and leave the Horde becomes understandable. To join Adora would, yes, put her back with Adora, but it would also mean submitting to Adora's authority. It would mean accepting that Adora can do whatever she wants, turn on whoever she wants, side with whoever she wants for whatever reasons, even if that means hurting the people who cared about her, like Catra, and face no real consequences for her choices. Catra's reluctance can also be explained to some extent by how Catra is able to rise through the ranks after Adora leaves. Adora's absence opens up a position that allows Catra to finally seize the success and power that she has yearned for but failed to achieve her entire life up to this point. Thus, she is reluctant to surrender her authority because it is so hard-won. The circumstances are not like the circumstances with Adora, wherein Adora has all this power and she has all these accolades without really having to fight and struggle to attain them. Catra thus cares deeply about Adora, but fights against Adora, and that juxtaposition places her in an existential state that is innately fraught and unstable. Catra knows on a certain level how much she really loves Adora, but she tries to convince herself that she despises Adora, because to do otherwise and admit her true feelings would force her to confront this contradiction directly, which Catra is afraid to do, in part because she knows that she is not being altogether 100% fair to Adora. That Adora does not understand the extent of Catra's bitterness, and the extent to which Catra was mistreated by the Horde is true. But that Catra was mistreated by the Horde does not mean that her siding with the Horde against Adora is a natural choice. One could reasonably argue that the opposite is true, that she should be that much more willing to side against the Horde because of how cruelly and callously she was treated as a kid. Still, leaving the Horde would mean, aside from accepting that Adora was once again right, it would mean reconciling with Adora and thus having to face the mixture of love and shame and guilt and yearning and deep, troubled affection that she feels toward Adora. That terrifies Catra. These contradictions grow in Catra until they overwhelm her, her guilt deepening to such an extent that she has a hard time operating functionally, especially in Season 4. This fissure in her psyche in part explains why she chooses the option she does in Season 5. Catra is mind-controlled in a sense, but typically I do not find these kinds of possession narratives particularly interesting. I find the conflict they create rather cheap and contrived. The effects of some malicious force taking over an unwilling person and forcing them into a conflict with the hero, instead of having that conflict arise organically from the choices different characters make. And certainly, She-Ra's villains are not its strong point, and no, I don't consider Catra a villain. She's probably an anti-hero. But I do like how it is not just her being possessed, it's her kind of yearning for that possession in a sense, subconscious as it might be. She does not want to have complete control over herself, because to have complete control over herself would mean having to face the contradictions between her deep love for Adora and her actions toward Adora and her resentment, not all entirely deserved, at Adora. And this is not a juxtaposition that Catra is prepared to handle, especially since her shame has increased to such an extent that it threatens to overwhelm her. Only when, midway through Season 5, does Catra realizes how much Adora cares for her, even now, does Catra finally confront her mixed feelings for Adora and accepts that Adora, whatever her flaws might be, is a kind and caring person. She is not this malicious image that Catra has constructed of this moralistic, sanctimonious, glory-seeking narcissist. The conflict between Catra and Adora when they were children was the result of the hyper-competitive, hyper-strict environment in which they were raised by Shadow Weaver. Adora, however disappointed she became in Catra, never gave up on Catra. Catra is moved by Adora's selflessness and her recognition that Adora, while not perfect, is willing to sacrifice and fight for those she loves, and Catra is on that list. Moved by this outpouring of care and compassion from Adora, Catra is able to move past all her shame and guilt and finally understand the extent to which she really genuinely loves Adora. Her love is no longer corrupted. It is no longer darkened by shame and resentment. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can and you want to see more videos like this. Keep watching She-Ra. I'm glad the show has maintained such a level of popularity a few years after the release of its last season. It's not a perfect show. I do think it can be a little over-sentimental at times, and the villains aren't great, as I said. But the relationship between Catra and Adora is messy and rich, full of passions and longings and bitterness and resentment, and above all, a genuine desire to connect. Anyway, tune in soon for my next analysis. It will be coming soon. Promise you that. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.